I'm just going to introduce one of them and leave him to do the rest. We're talking about delivering return of investment to brands at festivals and events and in venues. And the man to get us started on that is Dan Walsh, a PR and marketing guru. Dan.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this. As Nick said, we've kind of boldly titled this delivering ROI, how to deliver real ROI to brands at festivals, at events and in venues. I wanted to just start with a couple of apologies. We were supposed to have a brand owner and a venue owner join us today, which would have helped to kind of just make the conversation a little bit more 360. A little bit more 360, but unfortunately they had to drop out this morning, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't replace them, so apologies for that. Just a little bit about me. I've spent the last 15 years working in and around festivals and events, predominantly within marketing and PR, as Nick said, and I've worked extensively with brands who want to align themselves with festivals and events. We know that entertainment and music in particular is a key area for brands to align themselves with, because it's an area where people are most passionate. So it's a good place for a brand to place itself to engage with an audience. There's as I'm sure you're all aware, there's a pretty tried and tested formula for how brands engage with festivals. The general rule of thumb is get a tent, put a bar in it, and get DJs to play music. And if you follow those 3 simple steps, you're pretty much guaranteed to fill your tent with people. The problem is, what happens when those people who go into the tent and enjoy your music and enjoy drinking the alcohol that you're selling behind the bar, what happens when they leave that tent? And more importantly, what happens when they walk off the festival site? Invariably, brands have no idea who the people are that have been there. They have no opportunity to engage with them other than them being in the tent at the time and drinking their beer and listening to their music, and they have no opportunity to engage with them beyond the festival itself. So with that in mind, it's becoming increasingly more difficult for venue owners, event organisers and festival promoters to justify the vast amounts of money that they are charging brands to align themselves with their thing. Brands are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds for the right to be there. They're then spending more hundreds of thousands of pounds to create some kind of an on-site activation. And what do they get for it? There's almost no way to quantify what the return on investment is for that brand at that festival. And just to give you a very quick example, I was at a festival, I was at many festivals over the summer, but I was at one in particular, mentioning no names, and they had a huge beer brand activation area, again, mentioning no names. Now, the beer brand followed the 3 simple steps. They had a huge area, it had a bar in it, and they had DJs playing on the stage. And guess what? It was absolutely packed. But I was watching it over the course of the day, and I was thinking to myself, if I was to go and take the beer brand's logo off the middle of their activation and replace it with another beer brand's logo, would anyone notice? Or would anyone care? No one within that area cared what the beer brand was or what they were drinking. All they cared about is that they had a beer in their hands, they were at a festival with their mates, and they were having a great time. So how can the festival organizer justify the amount of money that they charge that brand to be on site? What is the point? We're at Event Tech Live. We're surrounded by incredible technology that allows the opportunity to engage directly with audiences and to create, to acquire customers and to create. So why are those things not being better adopted by brands in and around festivals and events? To discuss this, interrogate it, analyse it, I'm joined by Paul Pike, who is the co-founder and UK CEO of Intelligent Venue Networks. I'm also joined by Simon Levitt, who is the Global Creative Technology Director for Imagination. And lovely Nick has also agreed to join us because we were a little low on numbers. So thanks, Nick. I think I'm staying here, aren't I? Yeah. I'm going to stay here. So to kind of kick off this conversation, I wanted to go to you, Simon. Imagination are doing a lot of things to create experiences for brands. What what's the insight that you're getting from what brands want?
Well, I think what they're kind of looking for, brands in general, is a new way of thinking about how to approach audiences. I think we're past the point now of it's just a TV ad or it's just something that you click on a website. How can you engage your customers with something that is engaging, meaningful and memorable? And then how do you keep that relation going afterwards? And then to be able to do that, you need to start that relationship and kind of like give a real value exchange. So both parties are getting something from it. So what we're seeing, kind of what brands looking for is not only how can you get to as most people as possible, but the depth of that, the depth and the meaning of that conversation. And if you can do that, then you're building brand advocates out of the people that you're communicating to. If you build brand advocates out of the people you're communicating to, it's way, way more valuable than the brand telling you, buy stuff from us, because you've got your friends and your colleagues giving you that information.
So that's, I mean, I think one of the key words within that is relationship. You know, brands are always looking to establish a relationship with either an existing customer or a potential new customer. How are you seeing a shift away from real life experiences to digital experiences?
I wouldn't say a shift away from it, no. In fact, on the contrary, I think what we need to look to do is to combine them, to kind of allow that a physical event, that experience, then to kind of like have a longevity that also kind of goes into the digital area. And that's the real challenge, is that kind of like moving it from that physical state to the online state. So a lot of the work we're doing at Imagination is doing just that, creating amazing experiences, but having a rationale to also have a digital presence with it. One of the events we've done for Ford recently is kind of like a Track Days meets Hollywood, where you get to learn to be a stunt driver, and then you feature in your own trailer. And that trailer gets compiled on site, and then it gets sent to you, so then you can share it online with your friends and stuff like that, with you in it. So not only are you having a great experience, but you've got amazing content afterwards that you want to share. And that sort of connection, if you can do it like in a really clever way, means that you build that relationship.
And Paul, from an event perspective, Intelligent Venue Networks has spent many years providing, you know, in the early days of the event technology kind of explosion, things like access control opportunities. How are you seeing the requirement from brands to be part of a more seamless and integrated solution?
Well, the problem in what you might call festivals or green fields, areas where essentially we bring the whole infrastructure into a site and everything's temporary, it's got to come out again. The major blockage over the last 5 years to any of this development has been communication. And the fact that the infrastructure for networks, communication networks in greenfields has lagged behind production techniques, if you like, for a number of years. I've spent the last 3 or 4 years just moving festivals into an area where card payments, for instance, are now somewhere in the region of, let's say on average, 30 to 40% of the total take. But cash still predominates. And it's really only this year that full retail EPOS systems have been put into large festivals. At the same time, that's mirrored the lack of Wi-Fi development. And of course, you know, I'm sure you've all experienced, you go into a festival anywhere where you've got maybe more than 1,000 or 2,000 people, you can't use your phone. That's the very first. So anything to do with apps or communication, anything we're talking about really in this exhibition comes to a grinding halt. In the past, maybe we've got away with 4G for payment systems, for authorizations. That's ending now because everyone wants to send pictures, you know, Instagram, social media content, and so forth. So it's a vital part of any festival and any greenfield site that the infrastructure is considered possibly now the way power was 10 years ago as a major part of any development of a festival. It's got to be an integral part of the planning of a festival. And of course that rebounds totally onto activations because Just things like linking your Facebook profile to Access, you need communication. To upgrade someone into a VIP suite on site, need communication. And it needs to be seamless, because otherwise there's no point in doing it if there's a major lag.
So with that in mind, are we seeing events and festivals, festival promoters and event organisers shifting towards that? I get the sense from the work that I do in the sector that there's still a resistance from the festival organisers and the event organisers to actually embrace that technology and allow themselves to create to allow them to create the environment in which brands and brand partners can have meaningful relationships with the audience.
Well, I think there's two factors. The first thing is that the technology's there. It's been sitting there for at least a couple of years now in its infancy, and it's certainly capable of being rolled out. But the second thing is I think there's a demand from visitors to events to not have to behave in a way that they don't normally behave in the high street, simply by, for a start, being able to use a phone, simply by being able to pay for things by cards. And that's the beginning, if you like, I think, of the next 2 years, where we are going to be able to see a lot more innovation brought into to festivals because of the fact we've got a communication infrastructure there. At the same time, obviously, the numbers of companies now that are providing these services on a reliable basis is increasing. You only need to go back maybe 4 years, and there were possibly two reliable Wi-Fi companies in our industry, in the big events, in the sort of Isle of Wight festivals or downloads or Glastonbury. You've now got probably 5 or 6 delivering fibre networks. So the infrastructure's available. Clearly there's a question of cost. So in the future, to our thinking, it's going to be brands that, if they can make use of this technology, will actually benefit the event and therefore have beneficial effect on the actual staging of the event.
Yeah, but that's a kind of investment that I'm surprised brands haven't made, because in a festival you already got your audience there in person, going to something that they want to see and having a great memorable experience doing it. So if they can harness that and build that relationship there, then it's going to be for significant benefit to them.
Yeah. If I go back, a long time ago, 20 years ago, Philips sponsored Dire Straits. They've sponsored the tour.
Do any of you know who Dire Straits are?
So hopefully
some of you do.
People know who Philips are.
Great.
Philips sponsored Dire Straits. I felt the target market was there. I think we did 12 or 14 nights at Wembley Arena. The only way of Philips communicating that relationship to the people going through the door, who after all were their target market, was to have people on the doors giving leaflets away.
Right.
And we've moved a huge amount from there, but we've got a long way to go, I think.
Nick, you're involved with lots of events and event providers. Is that right to say?
Yeah.
And so what's your experience of how the events that you work with are kind of approaching technology infrastructure, and how are they working with their sponsors and their brand partners?
Well, I think when Download started in 2004-03, that was assumed to be a tipping point, I think, by its very name and the fact that was embracing of sort of internet technology. And I think people expected things to move faster than that. And if you'd asked people then where we'd be now, there would have been, everything would be cashless, for example. There would be another whole sort of raft of sponsorship potential there. You wouldn't have any wireless problems. There was all that assumption, and that was definitely indicated by that name. And obviously we've fallen short because the UK is famously likes things predictable and endemically conservative. They don't want radical change. And certainly festivals, and you can understand it some other way with organisers. If it worked last year, let's keep it like that. And the real technology has been pushing back a house, and in terms of, like the Adele show, like the Stones shows, where you've got that massive kind of weight of production, whereas people coming through the gate and taking their seat are by and large been relatively unaffected, so it's still all to come. And the nature of the sponsors, I guess, that telephone networks are loath or reluctant to sponsor things because, like you say, you don't get a phone signal, so you're almost precluding them from taking a more active role in festival. They can do niche events because you can, underline that the signal will be good. But when it gets to bigger ones, they're loath to. So I reckon we're at about a third or fourth tipping point now, where it's still all to play for in the next sort of 5 years max. Then everything will be cashless and everything will be dynamically different, and there will be a raft more sponsorship deals to be done. But that's kind of where it is.
It just feel like it needs to catch up, right? It's like, where's Festival 2.0? Where's that new type of experience where I'm connected to what's going on and it's feeding back to me all in real time, like you get when you're out on the street with, like, when you're communicating with your friends. You don't get the festivals feeding into you and feeding back in that manner.
I just wanted to kind of put some stuff out to you guys to get some feedback. How many of you go to festivals? Most of you. How many of you, when you go to a festival, would like to have full access to all of the facilities within your within your phone that you normally have in real life? Just one. So, yeah, no. How many of you are not bothered about your phone? Okay, interesting. So if a brand were to essentially own the technology around a event or festival environment, which meant that they had the ability to communicate directly with you on site while you're having that festival experience, how many of you would find that intrusive, or how many of you would be open to that kind of line of dialogue with a brand? Intrusive? Yeah, some. Open to lines of dialogue? Yeah, some at the back, some at the... Okay. So my question to the panel, where I'm kind of wanting to steer this to, is it strikes me that there is an opportunity for brands to really, in order to get return on investment from their alignment with these events and festivals, to own the technology infrastructure that allows them to create an opportunity to acquire customers and an opportunity to have an ongoing dialogue with those customers. Panel, thoughts on that?
I think if they own the infrastructure, that's one thing, but also it's the ability to integrate and use it, particularly on the, let's say, on the bars or on the food areas, where maybe it's redeeming vouchers or it's getting incentives. Funnily enough, Barclaycard in the sort of 2011 to 2012 to 14 period did a lot of activation in the early days, including, as I was saying earlier, upgrades, instant upgrades every hour, free gifts, posh loos. Just linking a wristband to a posh loo was a major benefit, because loos, as we all know, come out top of the surveys in terms of what's required at open air events. But to take up Simon's point, I think where the future lies is brands engaging with people going to these events before the event, as well as during and after, because it seems to me that this is what they're paying their money to appeal to. And if you look at festivals like, Lovebox, there are probably 14 beer brands, all with stages, as you said earlier, spending a lot of money on their infrastructure.
I didn't mention Lovebox.
Not having a clue about who's coming to their... No interaction whatsoever. It wasn't related to your earlier comment, by the way. But this, for me, if you take an example, I don't know, of, say, a Cafe Uno, who in the past put stages into places like Cornbury. It'd be quite nice if you bought a ticket to Cornbury to be given something when into a Cafe Uno before the event. You get something you redeem at the event, and then at the event you get something to redeem after it. And it lengthens the relationship between the brand and the event, which after all is the reason why they are spending the money they're spending.
Yeah, and it's got to be customer-centric in its approach.
Exactly.
I think that's what brands need to kind of think about. And like, some people were kind of like reluctant, putting their hands up about, well, will I want to look at my mobile phone in the event? And it shouldn't be just about that. It's about making your journey as a customer easier and more valuable when you're at the event. And if you can help them do that, and you can have that organic relationship kind of grow out of that, then they're going to be more open and more trusting and then you can gain some loyalty, and then you can have that kind of ongoing conversation. You can build up loyalty at the event. You can do things like secret gigs, and you can do things like you get special cocktails if you signed up for a particular brand information. But then you can do that after the event as well. So you can start exploring like oh right, we know that you went to see this gig or this particular person at the festival. Here's a backstage interview with them. Here's an exclusive track. And then then you've got that kind of bond between it, and then you've got that rhetoric of going like, oh, I had this app sponsored by X brand, and it was really great, and here are my memories of it, which is conversational, kind of like in a pub with your friends.
Nick?
The thing is it lends itself to one brand spending bigger bucks on a single event to get a bigger return, doesn't it, than lots of little ones. So you own the data, like we were talking about before. And Barclaycard is that guy, partially at least, at British Summertime.
Yeah.
But like, it hasn't quite squared the circle, but it's in a position to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, annoyingly, Barclaycard was actually the brand that I was hoping was going to be here today. And I think to Nick's point and to Paul's point, I think that Barclaycard and British Summertime are the ones that have got closest to what this environment might look like, but they've still not quite gone all of the way. And I think that Simon's point is exactly right. You know, it's and Paul's point actually. It's about extending the relationship beyond the festival site. The reason why the brand is there in the first place is because this is an audience that they've identified as being an audience that they want to engage with and potential customers that they want to acquire. So it stands to reason that they create an opportunity to have an ongoing and deeper relationship and dialogue with those potential customers, both before the event, on site during the event, and after the event as well.
Yeah, but I also think that there's two ways it can go. So you can have a brand sponsoring an event like you got Barclaycard, like Red Bull did brilliantly with the soapbox stuff. But I think you can also have like a kind of a one festival where many brands are there, and by understanding your customer base better, what those customers are interested in buying at the festival, then those brands can have a communication path to them, right? And then you've got something that the customer wants because they're purchasing that brand and they're interested in it, and they're not getting spam because you don't want that, right? And from that you build a building blocks of that relationship, of those kind of special offers, of the loyalty, and of everything that's going to go on afterwards, after you've left the event. So yeah, if you can do that pathway, that's great. But it's about having the customer information, so knowing your customer is vital for that.
It's also making sure that you don't abuse the relationship, because
I
know we've got GDPR now, which has made it much more controlled in terms of how we use data.
You just press the accept button, don't you, as soon as it pops up.
But you really do need to make that relationship meaningful, because otherwise you'll put them off. But obviously, if you treat people in a manner which is, conducive to the event and is beneficial to them, they're going to talk about it. So it's a whole area of social media sharing, which is another major benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever the relationship looks like, it has to add value to the customer. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It has to improve the customer journey and provide them with added value. But to your point, Nick, I still think that there's always going to be room for smaller sponsors to be a part of an event. But yes, it is going to require one big brand, changing the way that they approach alignment with these festivals and events, and instead of kind of having a real life experience, shifting its focus towards the kind of digital environment of a festival. And I don't feel like at the moment anyone's really thinking about the digital environment around an event or a festival, and I think that's a hugely untapped area for a festival or an event.
But it's so unreliable though, isn't it, still? So that does have an impact.
Well, it is, but actually, no, I would say it isn't. And I mean, I think Paul will probably come in at this point as well. I think the reason why it's been unreliable in the past few years is because no one's taking no events and festivals are prepared to invest in a seamless solution. So what's happening is you're getting lots of different providers who are doing, you've got one provider doing access control, you've got one provider doing network, you've got one provider doing EPOS systems, yada, yada, yada. And invariably what happens is they're not working together. They don't work, they're not channel agnostic. They don't work together as individual technology solutions. And what no one's done yet has invested in that holistic technology solution which is fully integrated, which fully which doesn't fall down, which has a robust network. At the end of the day, all of this is requiring a robust network. So if you don't have that, then you don't really have any of the stuff. And so we keep having these scenarios where, event organisers and festival promoters half invest in the technology, and then when it doesn't work, they kind of almost use that as an unconscious bias to say, see, we said it wasn't going to work in the first place, rather than investing in the the proper infrastructure in the first place. And I get that, they're event organisers and they're interested in making money. So, and this is a huge investment for them. So, which is why I see the opportunity for brands to move into that space and to own the digital infrastructure of an event. I mean, back in the day, to take Barclaycard and British Summertime as an example, what their sponsorship essentially revolved around them taking the traditional route of headline sponsorship, what's called headline sponsorship, which meant that it became the Barclaycard British Summertime Festival. That's a very traditional way of approaching sponsorship, and I'm really interested in whether or not a brand would move down the route of essentially buying the digital rights to an event or a festival. It works in the same way. They pay some money. They pay the money to the festival, to the event organizer, but in return they own the digital infrastructure for that event, and they provide the technology to the event, and therefore own the flow of data and the opportunity to talk to the audience.
Yeah. I think the way brands look at what a return on investment is it needs to shift a little bit as well, because they traditionally kind of see it as something is how many views have we had, what's the reach been. So speaking to their marketing leads and kind of like saying, actually, no, you need to look at it differently. You need to look at how long people spend with your brand and the level of engagement that they're having, and the value that big. 'Cause you can't calculate it as like one person. If I go to Red Bull soapbox racing and kind of like spend the whole day there, that is not the equivalent of somebody watching an advert really quickly, is it? So we need to calculate it in a different way, and we need to help them understand how to do it.
Well, the kind of the power of music and the power of entertainment in festivals and events has always been there. It's just we've just not harnessed it, and I think the opportunities now with as Nick said, the conservative nature of the industry, which is fair enough, because obviously festival owners, bar operators have 3 or 4 days to make their money. They're very reluctant to wholesale pilot something that they may or may not think will work. So it's been a longer process, but we have moved quite a long way in the last year or two, particularly in communication. And there's every reason to believe now that because of the penetration of smartphones, we've got essentially a new digital channel. That's effectively what we have, and it's up to us to make it work on behalf of brands and convince brands that this is where potentially, if they invest their money, they can actually get a very good return.
Got a question from the floor on Slido. How do we as event owners encourage the brands to do this? It's often hard to get them away from just badging an event.
So we're talking about how do event organisers and festival promoters get brands to shift their focus? Well, I think that for me personally, I think that the conversation needs to change. I think that fundamentally the awareness that is generated from a logo being in situ on site at a festival, or in situ on a festival's website, or on an email that goes out to people, has a certain amount of value. But I think that event organisers and festival promoters are missing a trick by not understanding the significant uplift in the value of owning the ability to talk directly with the audience, not just show them a logo, but talk to them, get feedback from them, understand what it is they're doing, and improve their experience. That's a much more valuable proposition for me. If I put myself in the shoes of a of a festival goer, I want to have the best experience possible. And if Barclaycard can help me have that, or if Red Bull or Coca-Cola or whatever can help me have the best experience possible, then I'm open to that for sure. So I think that the conversation needs to change. The logo or the brand identity, if for example a Barclaycard owned the entire digital infrastructure, the minute you hit the geofence when you arrive at the festival that they own the infrastructure for, you're going to get a message saying, welcome to Lovebox. Access our free Wi-Fi network. That's going to be branded with the brand's logo. Whenever they walk on site, you may get a message from the brand that owns the digital infrastructure saying there's a massive queue at bar number 2. So if you go to bar number 3 where there's no queue at all, we'll give you 3 reward points which you can redeem after the festival in a certain way at the festival. You can exchange for exclusive content, whatever it may be. So that's a much more interactive relationship than simply showing someone a logo and clicking through to having clicked through to the website.
Yeah, I think we can look at what we mean by sponsor. Like brands think about, we're sponsoring an event. I think we need to change that rhetoric as well.
Yeah.
We need to look at it as like it's a micro campaign, and every person there is a micro campaign that you can have personalised and tailored for them. So like if you think of it from that point of view and the opportunity to have before you start in a campaign with a person where you can have give them extra value, and in return for that they're going to be more loyal to your brand, are more interested in spending time and purchasing it, then that's going to be great. And then because you know what they're doing, you're going to be doing at events and at certain moments, you can make it tailored and personalise it to lots of different levels. And so therefore, it becomes an amazing opportunity for a brand, because you've got this kind of this golden space, right, where you've got a memorable event, and you can own that relationship by creating something that is completely targeted to a person.
I think also it's understanding as well what the commercial requirements of the sponsor is going to be, because traditionally, I think you said the old value of sponsorship was to take a sponsor's money, give them a tent, give them some naming rights, give them some hospitality and tickets. That was it. Activation has become much more part of what the client or the sponsor wants to do, and then see whether he can do it, but not the event owners making available to the sponsor, we have the opportunity to do this, it's much more of a dialogue. I think it's got to take place commercially.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that if the event organizer or the festival promoter invested in the digital infrastructure, the opportunities to sell access to the audience, if you like, increases exponentially. And I fully agree with Simon's point. I mean, I think that having a robust and broad-reaching technology infrastructure allows you to personalize the experience an infinite number of times. Essentially, you could personalize it to every single individual festival goer there.
Well, just before we run out, we're going to be swept out of the hall, I imagine, quite soon, but just one last question to finish. Hang on a sec. Are there any brands that are creating particularly effective festival activations? And I would say straight off the bat that the Barclaycard stage dive in Hyde Park was one of those examples, and Samsung Hypercube is another one where it's been really productive, big queues, people wanting to get involved, and I'm sure you've got a bunch of other ones.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do a lot of stuff, but it's not necessarily festival based. So I think you want to look actually at what other brands are doing and how they could bring that to a festival. We did some great stuff actually in Hyde Park with Major League Baseball, where we had huge events there, but also then it could become a baseball VR experience that you can pick up and you can move to lots of different places. So if you can kind of like think big and then make it small and maneuver it around, then that's the right thing to do.
I think I'd agree probably. Barclaycard have been at the forefront recently of sponsorship activation. But I mean, I was working with Levi's 20 years ago when we were doing live interviews backstage with artists and then just broadcasting them onto screens out the front. But if you imagine that's a piece of content. It's nothing to do with streaming or television rights, which of course is a big rights minefield, but just that social element of just conversation between the audience and the artist is perfectly possible. Interviews. I mean, we're getting some of it now in terms of band signings, and we're moving in the right direction. But there's certainly the opportunity now with the technology available to make it happen.
I just think that as my final word to this, my answer to the question is, it depends on how you quantify whether an activation is successful or not. My opinion is that no, I don't think any brands are doing particularly good festival activations in the context of what is achievable in this day and age with the technology solutions that we have available. I think if you quantify it in terms of number of people that go into the said tent and drink said beer and listen to said DJs, then sure, you could class them as being reasonably successful, even if they're only picking up 25% of the footfall from the overall audience at the festival. But in terms of whether they're delivering a successful activation in the context of what they could be doing, then the answer is simply no for me.
Thank you very much, all. Thanks, brilliant.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.